Today is the feast of St. Teresa of Avila, a Spanish Carmelite nun born just at the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. In her day, many women went into monasteries because they were placed there by fathers who couldn't marry them off. Having a vocation for the religious life was not a requirement for entrance at that time. It was an era when it could be argued that the Catholic Church was more concerned with money than with God. Many bishops were princes living in palaces. Religious communities were places of wealth and power. Decadence rather than austerity was the order of the day. Hence why Martin Luther and others across Europe decided that enough was enough, and they chose to break away from the Catholic Church as protesting reformers. Teresa opted for reform within. In her mid-40s, she decided that the only way forward for religious life was to go back to a life of prayer and poverty. She wanted to put God back at the centre. Sadly, she met with fierce opposition. She was denounced by preachers who said she was carrying out the work of the devil, and they threatened her with the Inquisition. Her belief in God and her determination to do God's will spurred her on to found her own convent. Teresa did not stop there, but travelled the country from convent to convent, trying to introduce reform. Her journeys remind me of St. Paul's in some ways, at times having to be smuggled into towns in the darkness of night, meeting threats and resistance from both the secular law and the church authorities. Teresa undertook this work from a background of ill health, following a serious bout of malaria, and she is the patron saint of headache sufferers. She'd also experienced a period in her life when God seemed remote and prayer seemed impossible. She was a contemporary of St. John of the Cross, known for his work, The Dark Night of the Soul. Both of them underwent a time of bleakness, a time of thinking that God was far from them, even if he existed at all. What they came to see was that this was a formative experience and that God was in fact very close to them. After all, Jesus cried out on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" If anyone says they have never known a time when prayer was difficult, well, we are not being true to ourselves. It is part of growing in faith. Teresa was also famous for her many sayings, one of my favourites being linked to the difficulties she experienced in trying to reform religious life. She shook her fist at God and said, "No wonder you have so few friends, if this is how you treat them." One of her most beautiful prayers is one of comfort for us all in any time of tribulation. Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. Though all things pass, God does not change. Patience wins all things. But he lacks nothing who possesses God, for God alone suffices. In a time of turbulent change, when the work of the Inquisition brought fear and reticence, when women had virtually no public voice, Teresa held close to God and with courage and determination carried out his transforming work of the Carmelite order and re-established a valid model for the religious life. 40 years after her death in 1622, Teresa was canonized by Pope Gregory XV. But it was not until 1970 and Pope Paul VI that Teresa was made the first woman doctor of the Church in recognition of her legacy of spiritual teaching. It can take some men a little while sometimes to realise that God can work just as powerfully through us women.